So let's move on to our next talk, a great segue into putting creative ops at the core of operations. And this is with Gary Klinger. Gary leads the solutions, marketing, and field marketing teams in developing marketing strategies and tactics for Workfront. So let's get into our next panel discussion.
With that, we want to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. So first, we have Carrie Roberts, who is, say hi, Carrie. Carrie is the Director of Design, Operations, and Resource Management at Johnson & Johnson, their design studio. Over 100 employees and kind of a huge operation there, so we're excited to learn from her today. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dickson Bueno, who is the Director of Creative Operations at HH Global. And he oversees the development of new creative satellite studios and on-site studios for HH. Welcome. Glad to have you. And then finally, Kevin Gepford, who is the Creative Operations Associate Director for Digital Marketing Group at AT&T. So welcome. Glad to have you all here. So with that as a primer, let's go ahead and kick things off. We've got a whole bunch of questions here today. We probably won't get to all of them. And we do want to save a few minutes at the end for questions for all of you. First off, and I'm going to start with Dickson on this one. I'm going to put you in the hot seat right off the get-go. Turl talked a little bit about kind of managing the chaos of creative operations and kind of how it's come to be. This idea of kind of adding structure to creativity. I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of how you came into what you do, and well, I'll start with that, just that. Kind of how you came into what you do.
Good morning. So for me, I think it all came out of necessity sort of in the market. I think we had, or at least in my career, we had two major crashes, financial crashes. And whenever those happen, the first things to go are marketing budgets. So what we saw, or what I experienced in the industry, was sort of a consolidation of expertise, where previously everything was a little bit more segmented, and all of a sudden you had an emergence of what became creative services, which had not existed in my world before. And so I went from heading up a production studio to all of a sudden trying to figure out how I was going to fit into this new world, and just kind of organically came into creative services. And as that sort of took off and became its own little thing, then came another crash, at least in the West Coast. And so that eliminated a whole bunch of positions. And then sure enough, there was a resurgence, and it was like, all right, I think for creatives, or creative, especially internal, inside a bigger business, there was a need to justify your existence. And that's where creative operations started coming in my point of view. It was, how do we justify to stakeholders that we need to keep this creative part moving, even during tough times? And so all of a sudden, there was metrics, and there was data, and there was things that helped justify our existence and the existence of creative. So in my world today, I feel like I'm there to make the actual designers and creative thinkers do their job and not worry about sort of the minutia of what if this happens, what if that happens, because we're there to help justify that role. So I think for me, it was just sort of an organic evolution as a result of changing times, especially in financial industry.
So interesting how those crashes that you refer to and kind of the stresses that put on the system kind of necessitated something like creative operations. Carrie, how about you?
I feel like creative operations in some form or another has been around for a while. My very first job was working with a creative and kind of managing everything that she needed to get done. She had this vision and she wanted to make it happen, and she needed someone to help her do that. And that was almost 20 years ago. And so I've been in that kind of space over the course of my career and had multiple titles and different formats of that. But I think it's sort of always been at the core. There's an idea, and how do we bring it to life? And there's a subset of people that sort of have that ability to kind of bridge the communication from the creative to the marketing team or the client, and help to see that vision and really kind of bring that to execution. So I feel like it's kind of morphed over the years, and there's been a formality to the title over the last maybe 5 years or so, but there's always been us. There's always been us in the picture.
Awesome. Fantastic. Kevin, I'll start with you, but I'm interested in all of your all's thoughts on this question. It seems that a lot of the creatives that we work with, a lot of the folks that are producing the work and coming up with the great ideas can be resistant to the notion of so much structure and, hey, the metrics and all the things that Dickson brought out. How have you found it working at AT&T with trying to get creatives to embrace the structure along with all of the creative thinking that they have to do?
Well, I would say for our environment, the structure that matters to us, or the structure that matters to me, is not sort of a top-down forcing of structure. It's a very bureaucratic organization. Actually, I should start with that. It's very bureaucratic. Nothing you can do will be worse than what already exists. Oh my God. But the solutions that I've been working on, as I've been there about a year, have been revamping certain processes and providing structures, but it's insanely better than what exists. So it's actually pretty welcome. So for me, the structure is taking a cobbled together group of systems or some, rather ineffective processes, cutting all of the friction out of it, or revamping the tool that then allows people to do their jobs more effectively, rather than coming in and bossing everybody around and making them do it. You sort of have to get them to use the new way, or go with the new way, but there hasn't been a lot of resistance because the benefits are so obvious.
So maybe starting early and getting some quick wins within the creative teams to help them see the benefit.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that that's a good way of putting it.
Okay. Carrie, what's your experience been there?
A lot of hand-holding, some therapy sessions. I think for me, it's baby steps. It was like kind of taking a core team, getting them into a new system, getting them to spread the message as opposed to me. So getting them on board and having them be the advocate for it and the influencers to the rest of the department to say, this is a great system. It's helped my life. Look at how it's improved my process and systems. And then having them be on my team and on my side so that it's not bringing, sort of me bringing a process to everyone. It's kind of going through it together.
So getting a creative to say, this is the way that we ought to do things rather than you coming
So you really kind of have to find the people on the team that are going to be the champions for new technology or new process and systems, and allow them to really get into it and let it speak for itself.
Fantastic. Dickson, same experience?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Just identify. For us, it's a matter of identifying that influencer, that advocate in the team, that and luckily we have one who loves kind of mingling with tech, and it's like, oh, okay, and you're like, oh, this is why it's so cool, and then it's just sort of becomes like a game of telephone, like, oh, this is really great, it's going to help us, it's going to change our lives. Not really, but it'll change my life if they use it. So anything we can do to get people to buy in. So, just getting a key person buy into what you're trying to, implement. Because it can be a pain to learn something new, but it's, sort of you have to look at, oh, well, what's the benefit? So having someone that they can relate to, that works with them, that's sort of in the trenches, who's an advocate, like you said, is really helpful.
Fantastic. I want to switch gears just a little bit in terms of what Turl was talking about with more. I mean, we all feel that, right? Just the weight of more, faster, better, work on the right things, get them done. And so much of what happens with creatives is there's that one person on the team, and she's getting all the work because she's the best and she's the one that people are asking for. And maybe that's, 5 people on a team of 20. How do you, as creative operations folks, how do you manage to where you don't burn out the best creative minds that you have on your team so they don't want to flee your organization and look for something that's not having them working 100-hour work weeks? Dickson, I'll start with you on that one.
I kind of just went through this in the last couple of months, and I think and I don't know if this is going to work out long term, but so far it's working. I thought that it would be great to make that sort of create a structure within the creative team where people started having, obviously you get promoted to different things, but creating little clusters where these individuals who are star folks all of a sudden became, we call them leads. So we have design leads, production leads within smaller teams. And so what that created or has created so far is sort of a psychological shift for everybody else. Is like, oh, well, if I rock it out, then I can become a lead on my way to. So creating these really important milestones as part of career paths has sort of given everybody else the opportunity to elevate their game and match other people. And so now their quality of work is better, and it's influenced by these leads who they're not necessarily art directors, but they do help sort of develop and grow other team members. And so that's been key for us in trying to solve that problem, because we did have it. And it's like, well, everybody has an opportunity to learn. So sort of just shifting it around from, hey, we're here. It's an opportunity to learn and grow from each other. And so we have, a great new career path for you. And so so far it's helped. I'll let you know in about a year, but so far so good.
Hopefully your team's still all there, right? Yeah. That's good. Great. Carrie, how about you?
I think for me, it's making sure that there's diversity on the team. So making sure that there's a sort of specialist in each different area that people can rely on and count on. So if there's someone that's really strong in one area, making sure that that's balanced out across the team. And then also visibility. So every Monday I go through what my team is working on and make sure that we try to level set the workload. So if one designer is really overburdened, what are the projects that they can kind of take a leading role on, but have someone else come in and support them to try to balance that out. So it's really having the visibility into the studio and what your team is working on to make sure that that doesn't happen before it actually gets to that point.
Okay, great. Kevin, thoughts on balancing all your team players' work?
For us, I would say one of the benefits of it being a corporate environment is that it's not a sweatshop. We have pretty regular hours. There's not a lot of overtime. So load balancing and distribution of work is very important, but burnout isn't what I'm trying to prevent. What I want to prevent is project managers all picking the same rock star that they want to work with, and refusing to work with anyone else. And then I also want to prevent the rock star from rejecting doing some of the grunt work. So it's a pretty democratic environment. And I've got some real reasons for that, because our workflow is a bit cyclical. So you never know when they're going to drive up and unload, a massive project. And I need a well-distributed work that comes into that environment. And then I need a pretty well-balanced team with well-balanced skills in order for it to trickle out. And I've got teams in both coasts. I've got a designer in Seattle. It's a very distributed group. So that said, my one rock star, he actually did reject probably our most menial project, and he waited until the last minute to do it. So
that never happens.
Right.
Come on.
No, you don't sit on it for 3 days and then decide that. So I ended up having to do this, and I called him in. I said, that was my method too. I was the rock star, and it was a crushing load of work. It's kind of you can get yourself into that situation if you like to operate that way. But I said, I'm leading by example. I'm doing the shit work, and so will you. Now, because you're amazing, you're going to have to do as much as the other guy. Is there anyone that you work with that you hate so much that you want that to be their job? So we got to spread it around. So that really what for me the goal of team building as well is one of the things that I'm going for.
Interesting. Thank you. Appreciate that. Jerry, you brought up visibility. And Turl talked about too many cooks in the kitchen, which this is great for visibility, because with the advent of so many technologies to kind of help with the collaboration around these projects, how do you provide visibility to projects? And kind of a secondary question to that is there such thing as too much visibility for certain team members? How do you parse out who sees what?
So I recently joined the team at Johnson & Johnson, and that was their biggest challenge, is that they had zero visibility into their design studio, which is over 100 designers, what anyone was working on. And so we're actually in the process of onboarding a tool right now, which will allow us to see the full capacity of the studio, all the 300 plus projects that we're working on, and who's assigned to each. So through that, we'll be able to kind of go through and look at what everyone's working on, make sure that it's well balanced. And as far as
Who sees
insight
what?
into the visibility, who can see it. The way that we're setting it up is for everybody to see it. Every designer is able to see it, all the way up to the head of design. So it may be too much information, but we're going to start it out revealing everything. I think it sort of depends on how hands-on the leadership is, and how much they want to get into the nitty-gritty. But I really believe that it's important for everyone from a leadership level down to be able to see what the rest of the team is working on, because then when you have people who are saying, I'm overloaded, I'm working on way too many projects, it's clear and it's visible to everyone that that's what's happening. And then you can also sort of see the pockets where there's some light workloads too, and start to address those issues. So I think it's good for everyone to see it.
Fantastic. Dickson?
So for us, visibility as far as workflow and projects and stuff like that, I think from the most important thing is obviously we have a traffic people throughout the world that sort of all share in that. And then we started doing this whole business intelligence tool with all this data, and which is great because it goes to our CEO, and so in theory, he looks at this every week. But we do have a meeting about it every other week, and it's funny the things that he looks at. So visibility can be a curse, right? Because you're like, oh, great, they get to see everything we do, but then they also get to look at, if you have a slow week, well, why is your utilization so low? Right. Why is this? And you're like, oh. Yeah. So yeah. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Why are you using this font?
Right.
This? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it's pretty interesting. And then as far as work, visibility of work from a global perspective, we developed this. We're on a Google platform, so we developed a internal G+ page, and so we share all of the creative work around the world that we think is great and wonderful and lovely, and could probably influence somebody else in another one of our offices. And so that creates visibility for the entire business to see just the creative part and how we're sort of working with our clients and the stuff that's going out, and that's been really great because the people that we talked about sort of motivating and getting people to buy into stuff. Once people get recognized at that level, they're like, oh, wow, I did something really great. And it's all about sort of tricking the mind, not really tricking, but you really want to showcase what they do, and so they feel good, and it keeps them going. And so there's, we try and be as visible as possible, but just word of caution, it can come back to bite you.
There's pros and cons.
There's pros and cons.
Okay. Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, the kind of visibility that matters for me and my group recently changed because we've been through a reorg, and so there's new managers in a different state, different time zone, and they have no idea what we do, and they're also concerned about overtime. That's pretty much it. Overtime, we don't want to see any overtime, and then what is it that you guys actually do? So the overtime problem sort of solves itself. If we can't do overtime, we can't do some work. And there's an existing system that sort of tracks, our spend. But also, in the year that I've been there, I've instituted a review and approval system that's sort of a central repository for all of our creative work. So it's really easy for us to send a link to any exec or manager, and you can say, here's the dozen things that we did for the last campaign, and they can look at that at a high level and see the number of things that we produced, and then they can also step back and see that some units had a dozen rounds of revisions, and all the churn came from a business unit that kept changing their mind, and you can track the comments and this kind of thing. So that kind of visibility will be very beneficial down the road when we need to put our foot down and say no to some people. But we're a culture of yes. I'll just be honest with you. No, seriously, you can't say no to anybody. But which is kind of sad, but maybe that'll change. I'd like to change that. But the fact that we can see where the waste is happening or things, that's good visibility to have, and I'm already tracking that. So when the time comes for me to have that conversation with my manager, or if it changes again, different manager, we'll be ready to have that argument.
Yeah, nothing helps you say no quite like data.
Yeah. And then the last thing is, this tool also gives visibility laterally. So the various contributors to a project can see what else is going on. And I think that's super important for brand consistency and teamwork.
Fantastic, thank you. Dickson, I'm gonna start with you on this question. Put you in the hot seat again. Scope creep. So we talked about how, Kevin just talked about people changing their minds. How do you handle the inflow of requests for creative projects when people, business units, we won't say who, maybe it's HR, they don't know what they want. They think they know what they want, and then they give you a project, and then all of a sudden you're in the 6th, 7th round, and it's, no, this is wrong, this isn't what we want. How do you handle scope creep? How do you manage that?
So for us, whenever studio managers or a designer get something like that, they call me. And they call me because everybody else in the business knows that I'm going to be like, no, that doesn't work. And here's why. So I'm that guy. But, it's usually about education, because some people in a company don't realize that all those changes actually cost money. And they think it's, you wave a magic wand and you make 18 revisions in half an hour. It's like, no, that doesn't happen. And once we actually had to do this with a client, we actually sat there after a project went through, believe it or not, almost 20 some odd revisions. I said, this is great. And I love the fact that you're paying for this. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is how much time it took to get all these revisions done. And this is the dollar amount that, you're going to be charged for it. And they were like, oh, they didn't realize that. So I think once you sit with someone, a client or even internal, and you're like, all right, this time equals money, and they look at it and they realize that it impacts them financially, then they button up a little bit better, and then they get other people on their team to sort of button up a little bit better. So I think part of it is education. A lot of folks just, again, think you wave a magic wand and creative happens, and changes can happen in 5 minutes. But once you have that conversation, I think their mindset, they kind of realize, oh, I need to be better.
So a lot of it's just kind of teaching those.
Yeah, it's communication.
Clients, internal or external.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how, it's worked for us.
Okay. Carrie, your thoughts there?
I think it's actually a little bit tied to the visibility piece, because once you can actually share a project plan with your partner, you can share the hours spent on it, rounds of revisions, all those kind of things. Those become very helpful tools in combating scope creep. So you can say, look, we only have 2 weeks left on this project. That was what was built out for the scope. We need to make a decision now how you're going to spend the next 2 weeks of your time. Or, we've already spent this many hours or this many revisions. So that allows you to just have those sort of conversations. And I think a lot of times we become the kind of no police, the black cloud, raining on everyone's parade. But
You're the bad cop.
Yeah, it's bad. Part of our jobs is to be that bad cop, because the account person needs to have that good relationship with our partner. So we have to come in with the data to say, here's why you need to go back and fight against the scope creep and stop it. And then just agree on how you're going to move forward to stay within, that timeline or budget.
Comments on key performance indicators, things you would push up?
For us, we look at 3 big things. So utilization. So we want to make sure that.
What's the right percentage there? Is there a sweet spot?
Well, for us,
you don't want 120% utilization. That doesn't work. It's not sustainable.
For us, it's about 85%.
Okay.
So if we can reach an 85%, then we're good. So we look at that. We look at our, obviously our cost per individual, per job. Right. So we take a look at, and so that's direct correlation to utilization as well. And then we also take a look at our estimate versus actual. So did we estimate properly? And that's been really interesting because we're, historically we're like, oh yeah, we know exactly what we're doing. And then we see some projects are, going over, and either it's for the same client, so we are able to identify patterns now that we weren't able to before. And so now we're really looking at our estimating process and saying, okay, how do we do this better so that we're both accurate for our purposes and for the client? So those are 3 things that we look at.
Fantastic.
All the things that he said, we don't have to do. I'm so sorry for you.
So your audience matters. So different organizations might require
it's totally different.
different tasks,
There's literally
for
one
sure.
budget code for 100 people. It's astonishing.
Thoughts
It's
there?
great. I really like it.
Thoughts?
My world is more in line with Dickson's, where it's really about utilization and efficiency. And I think we're operating at about 120% right now. So I'm trying to dial us back to about 90 to get us in a good place.
Cool. Seems like it's about right. You don't want to just max it out.
Yeah.
It just doesn't go. You're all young, but seasoned. What are the biggest changes you've seen come about in your careers with regard to how you manage the operations of a creative team? Any big changes you've seen?
We no longer work on spreadsheets.
Okay, no spreadsheets. Spreadsheets down. What about email? Email down?
Technology's
email up?
been great. Technology, and there's so
Okay.
much of it, right?
Yep.
So, and we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I think that's the biggest change I've seen is, obviously it makes it easier for us to come up with all these wonderful metrics and KPIs and all this stuff. So it's just more stuff to learn, but the visibility internally you get into this machine that is not just about design, but you're actually looking at it from a business perspective with numbers and figures and all this stuff. And you're like, oh, we never looked at that when I first started. It was never even thought about. So that's been interesting for me in some ways to look at.
Other thoughts there?
Yeah, the technology and communication methods, everything is faster. You need it faster, you need to get it to market faster. And so that visibility and taking things out of email is really allowing things to kind of speed up and allow things to track and traffic through the system a little bit quicker. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, I'd say. But I think technology has allowed us to give some real credibility to what we do and what we bring to the table. So that's been very valuable.
Thoughts there?
I'm thinking of 2 things. The first thing is I really miss the job folder or the job jacket.
Job jacket. Yes. Hand it around. There we go. We wonder why it took so long.
Person to person, staple the nose one to the top.
Who has that anyway? Where's the job jacket? Do everyone ever have to do that? Right?
Well, it's a great metaphor for some of the great software that is actually out there trying to capture that concept and allow stuff to go around without printouts. So that's one of the big changes. Our whole process is digital. I'm a print guy. And that's been a big change, I think, just in the world we live in. The other thing is, so I worked for Comedy Central for 12 years. And the thing that I saw there as a production, Photoshop person was the variety began to increase. Now, this is definitely true for digital assets. And we're getting in a world where we're trying to do some customization per individual. So that's going to present some really interesting challenges. Deliver a different graphic for every demographic. But even in the print world, when the switch went from regular offset printing to digital printing, and we were doing bus shelters across New York City, now instead of doing one creative, let's say a subway poster, instead of one creative, you got to do 4 creatives for the same show, just because you can, and it's much more cost effective. You don't have to print. You don't have to reset the presses, right? It's just another digital print, but it makes a lot more work on the creative side. So I think that is one of the things where technology has enabled more variety, whether it's print or digital.
Thank you. The workforce is changing a little bit. I think one of the latest reports out shows that over 50% of the workforce now are millennials. Has that changed any of the work? Has that changed the nature of what we do? I mean, the way that we talk about it, our CEO talks about millennials as digital natives, and old guys like me, digital immigrants, and how for them, everything at the outset is applying technology. They don't look at a problem without looking at it through the lens of technology first. Has that changed at all what you all do and how you do it? The millennials being there.
I think from a communication perspective, it's changed things a lot. Everything's sort of moving out of email and onto different channels like Slack and even IM and text message. And so for me, I kind of struggle with that because you have 10 different conversations going about one project. So you're trying to wrangle all of that in together. They don't often really want to write a creative brief. They're like, I'll text it to you. It's cool. And that sometimes, so I think kind of changing that mindset a little bit, because there's a little bit of a rejection of that formality. So I think it's changing because of that. And so how do we adapt those methods, and how do we kind of keep them in a big pasture as opposed to a cage, and kind of set some parameters as to how are we going to continue this process and systems and efficiency, because they're very open to new technologies and new systems. I think it's just kind of getting them into the habits of using those on a regular basis.
So there are still boundaries, but a little wider.
Yeah.
So good. Other thoughts there?
I think for us, the workforce has changed in the sense that they don't know what we used to know. And by that I mean we have designers who have never done a mech, who wouldn't know how to set up a document for print if you paid them extra. And so you're like, wait, what? So they can't, when they design, they just design what's on the screen. They don't think about what the final product is going to be, what the final application is going to be.
Or any of the process.
Or any of the process there. So they don't set up files right. And so we go through this process of hiring, designers that are really good aesthetically, but technically they're not very skilled. And so we go through a sort of a training process to be able to get them up to speed. And fortunately, we've got a couple of experts in that field who, again, through this little structure, are able to kind of share their knowledge and impart that into the newer folks who have never, they don't know what a mechanical is. And so that part's been frustrating with, I think, the newer workforce for us when it comes to design.
Kevin, we'll give you the last word.
Oh, well, don't tempt me.
Before we get questions from the audience, we are going to take a few minutes. So
I like
we're thinking of great stuff.
What you said about communication, but I literally had a millennial come to me and say, fewer words would have helped. So I wrote a really great email. So they like their communication really short and succinct. They just want to hear the bare necessity, like you said, text it to me, which means that they don't really have an appreciation for process, right? It just slows them down. They want to get to work. They want to put their headphones in. So getting their attention, and it's harder. Oftentimes they don't really like to collaborate as much. And I would say the last challenge is we've had to redefine pixel perfect. Just because that's just the nature of the talent. People aren't old school. They spray it out there, and we really had to look hard at what we expect, what meets our needs. And a little of lowering of our standards helped a lot. De-stress the situation for me.
Just shoot lower, right?
Not too much lower, but maybe just a little less.
All right.
That's just the practical. Well, actually, even in the print world, with sophisticated art directors, with experienced art directors, I've seen the level of attention to detail and the insistence on color accuracy has gone down, even among seasoned people. So I think the whole industry has sort of changed and decided to focus more on the message rather than on maybe some details that would be missed by most of the people who would.
So relaxing a little bit. Maybe.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's millennials or just how fast we have to move.
Okay. Thank you for that. We've got 3 awesome panelists up here. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody? We've got a microphone that can rove. I see a couple hands. We'll go here first. Oh, sorry. I guess we'll go there first.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm going to sit down. So we have a relatively small creative team, and we don't track our hours to any billable projects. It's basically a very hands-on creative team. Like everybody gets down and dirty in all of the projects. And so sometimes these project owners or project requesters will go directly to the creative team, say, oh, can you just do this real quick for me? Can I have this logo in black and white? Well, then the logo request turns into an ad, which requires more copy. Then the ad turns into a poster, which then turns into a billboard, which then turns into customized emails to everybody. And all of this is happening. We have no creative brief, no timelines given to us about when exactly they need it, because it all started with, for example, a logo request. And the designers, of course, we come from a culture of yes. So we're always, of course, we want to service what we need. We want to make sure we don't miss any opportunities. But at the same time, when those rogue requests come in, it kind of gets everybody crazy, and everybody's working on different things, and now we don't have a timeline for that specific project that turned in, that came from a logo request to now specified customized emails, and to a full-blown campaign. So how do you kind of manage those rogue projects, and how do we get them back into line? No matter how many times we tell everybody, like, it has to follow process, we need a creative brief, we need due dates and timelines. How do you manage those rogue requests?
Bad cop.
Yeah, that's
Bad
what
cop.
I feel like sometimes.
Bad cop and bodyguard. I think, to me, it's a partnership with the people who are requesting that, and also down to the designers to know that they can say no. They can say, you know what, you need to speak to this person. I'd be happy to help you with that, but it needs to go through the proper channels. And you need to assure all the designers that you have their back and that you're there to support them, and they can point them in a different direction when those requests come in. Because if, just one of those can really spin out into 10 more.
Well, I really want my team to say yes as often as they can. So it takes 10 minutes. It's easy to do. Say yes. I don't want a brief for a black and white logo. But the challenge I'm facing right now is I'm down a couple of staff, and we got to wait for the org to figure itself out before I can rehire. So I'm a little bandwidth constrained. So what I do is I pick the project that I hate the most and say, this will impact it, or pick something that's important and stick the little request on that and say, well, this is going to affect the highest profile project. It's going to make something that was late that everyone cares about, and it's your fault. It's political in a way. Manage it. I mean, don't be as blunt as me. Well, the real me isn't as blunt as the front here me. But you can sort of play one against the other, and that will also be a teaching moment for the perpetrator to experience maybe a little bit of shame, or who do they want to fight for resources, right? So there you go. Pick the designer that's working on a project managed by the tiger, and let the two tigers fight it out.
I feel like I have, we've tried to say, okay, we need a little bit more time, negotiating timelines and all that. And then the name dropping happens. Well, so-and-so, like way up there, asked for this, and we need it tomorrow. So, so then we find ourselves in that struggle. It's like, okay, we have to do this, but, now we have to kind of realign projects and designers and all of that.
So one of the things you mentioned was you're not tracking time, right? And I think once you do, and if it goes name dropping up at the top, and that person comes and says, hey, why aren't you doing this? You can be like, well, this is how much time it takes for this to become that. And this is what it looks like in dollars. I guarantee you that person at the top is going to be like, oh, yeah, no, that's okay. We'll put it on the schedule. Once you're able to have that data, and that's probably where the data comes in and helps out, is you can sort of, it's not just about saying no, it's saying this can't happen this way because of X. And you've got time and you've got dollars associated to that time that really impact the business. And when it's I think just about any business, when it impacts the bottom line, they'll be like, all right, we'll see it from your point of view. So I think that's going to be key. If you start doing that, you might start seeing a change.
Chris, we have time for one more question? One more. I think I saw another hand, so I want to make sure we get to that.
Hi, my name is Julie, and just to add to what you asked, we actually changed how we do our work, so we are almost 100% agile, and that's really helped with these rogue and one-off kind of questions and issues that have come up. But my question, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about it because we don't deal with those little favors as much anymore. So, you talked a lot about visibility, and I was just curious how you go about showing and showcasing your visibility, whether it's a PowerPoint software tool, whether it's to the executive team or just your whole, your team as a whole. How do people know what everyone's doing at any given time, and how do you showcase that? Because we kind of struggle with that, and sometimes we run around and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I have to show my manager on Friday, and pulling together a PowerPoint. We've used some type of tools in the past, but I was just curious to see what you all use today. You can start.
Well, the tool that I use, it's actually one that I developed in-house for this reason, because this is one of the values that matters a lot to me. You can go in anytime, share a link to the entire project, and it's a gorgeous slideshow, top level, it just shows the latest revision of anything you've got. And I think that's the most powerful way to look at where we are right now with the campaign, not only the content of the campaign, the consistency of the campaign, but also the scope. So yeah, click this link, boom, there you are, the 12 things we're working on. And then you can create, I think slideshows are the easiest way to show what you're doing, and whatever method you use, you need a good way and a simple way to set something up that then you can share.
So what, just specific, click what link? Is it in a program? Is it in?
Well, okay, it's a web-based application, cloud-based application. So that our users use, they upload their graphics into it. That's how it gets approved. But anybody can go there and share a link from this project that's online, and you can, and then the recipient can view it.
Sounds like maybe there's a follow-up conversation with you two there. Yeah. You might be able to do some consulting for her, make a little money on the side. Goodness there. We want to thank our panelists.